Well, it's very exciting to see such a full house, so thank you for joining us this evening. Happy New Year and welcome back to the school year. I'm glad we could all make it in today. Madam Secretary, will you please take roll?
Madam President, I find that all 5 board members are present today.
Thank you. Next, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance, and I ask that you stand. Ms. Dana Kendall is going to lead us, our Executive Secretary. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have a special presentation, School Board Proclamation by Dr. Wall, which we have no idea what this is. So, Dr. Wall, you go.
Okay, I'm going to move down to the podium so that we can greet these young men and young ladies that are with us tonight, and we'll get on with the recognition. And as I do this, if I could have the board come in front of the arc here for this recognition, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Each year, School Board Recognition Week is observed by more than 13,500 school districts across the United States and approximately 350 in the state of Indiana. We are declaring and proclaiming this is School Board Recognition Week in Carmel Clay School District. And I will read the proclamation to recognize these 5 dedicated community servants to my right and honor them this week, as we should every week, for their community service. Whereas the men and women serving as board members of Carmel Clay Schools are dedicated to children, learning, and community, and devote many hours of service to elementary and secondary public education as they continually strive for improvement, excellence, and progress in education. And whereas the members of the Carmel Clay School Board of Trustees respond to the educational needs of the communities they serve, and in doing so, these leaders help strengthen our state's educational system and improve future prospects for our children. And whereas during the second week of January 2014, special recognition is held in observance of School Board Recognition Week, and it is fitting to join in acknowledging the commitment and contributions of our local school board members this evening. Therefore, I, Nicholas D. Wall, Superintendent of Carmel Clay Schools, do hereby proclaim January 12th through January 18th as School Board Recognition Week in Carmel Clay Schools. So let's give them a warm round of applause. And to add to the recognition, we have our 15 of our very special young leaders with us tonight, representing each of our fine schools. And parents, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us tonight to celebrate School Board Recognition tonight. And our building principals, thank you so much for being here to help us celebrate this kickoff of School Board Recognition Week as well. So as I call the student's name, please come up, and Tricia Reynolds, our Director of Community Relations, will give you your appropriate bundle of carnations to give to the board members. And for parents, we're going to have a pause after the recognition, so if you want some photo opportunities for your son or daughter, we want to have that opportunity as well. So we'll have a little pause in the meeting for that opportunity tonight. So we have Carmel Elementary, Annalise Kazmarek. Kazmierzak. Sorry about that, Annalise. My apologies. We have Katie Kumbelik. Katie. Brandon McCorkle. Brandon. Emma Olson. Daniel Schrader Dobry. Daniel. Max Arbecker. Brandon Persinger. Jonathan L.F. Theory. Megan O'Connor. Bennett Hammond. Reed Anderson. Reese Nardine. Ellie Clark. Nick Fry. And George Jamilis. George, good to see you again.
So if we want some photo opportunities, this would be a good time. We'll take a little pause. What are these? I mean, what perfect photos. They've got flowers and proclamation. So we'll do that now, and if the students are let us know. Okay, we're ready.
Shake that thing off.
Next on the agenda is the President's report, and on behalf of the Board, Mr. Pfeiffer, HUD Pfeiffer, is going to present the negotiations update.
Thank you, and congratulations to all of you. As you know, we had our fact-finding, and so we thought this was a good time to kind of recalibrate and go through where we are in terms of our negotiations. By way of background, as we've talked about many times before, Carmel is a very high-performing, award-winning school district. You know, we all know we've got great teachers, we've got great administrators, we've got great staff, we've got a great school board. And, of course, best of all, perhaps, great students. Community and parental support, we've really got all the things we need here for a super school system. And we've got board and administration who very much appreciate and value and support teachers. As we know, Carmel Clay is one of the top school districts in Indiana in terms of career earnings. You as a board, the superintendent, the others in the administration, and I all understand how hard teachers work and value them greatly. As you know, 3 of you are former school teachers. I'm a former school teacher. 2 of you taught in Carmel had long distinguished careers teaching in Carmel, and 2 of you also were the president of the CCA and bargained on behalf of teachers during your term. We all know that we and other districts in Indiana have real fiscal challenges. The state's reduced its funding. Very little new money. Those of you that have bargained in the past know that bargaining used to be about how to divide up the new money. Well, if that's what bargaining was about now, there wouldn't be much that we could offer teachers, and that wouldn't be a very good thing. For example, in this current school year, under the funding formula, there was only $887,000 under the state formula that came in as the new money. The referendum provided another approximately $175,000. We had some miscellaneous revenue that went away, about $225,000. So our total so-called new money was $839,000. That doesn't go a long way when you're trying to bargain a contract and you're trying to reward teachers who are doing such a good job. So fortunately, you and this district took some affirmative steps in the past to position us to be far more than we otherwise could do just based on the state funding. As you know, the board proposed, and fortunately our community supported, a referendum. It was a $12 million referendum, and because of some changes in some of the tax laws, it actually will yield $14 million for us. And that's what's really enabled us. That much more so than just the new money from the state is what's enabled us to add teachers, to keep class sizes low, and to pay for salary and benefit increases. So how does all this play out in terms of our bargaining for the 2013-2014 school year, our current school year? Well, as you know, we went through bargaining, and we reached a tentative agreement. That was during mediation. It was after an all-night session, literally all-night session, that we mediated. And the CCA bargaining team, the leadership, and the district's bargaining team reached a tentative agreement. We agreed on what the contract was going to be for 2013-2014. We reached that agreement on November 25th, 2013. And this is what it would have looked like. It would have been an increase in base salary of 1%, which would have cost a little over $500,000. Effective and highly effective teachers would move up one step on the salary schedule, and there was a salary schedule included in there that looked a lot like the old one, but with some new factors as required by state law. That would have cost $1.25 million to do that. There was a performance bonus pool of $500,000 for teachers who were effective or highly effective. All would participate equally in that bonus pool under the tentative agreement. And there was a reinstatement of the 1% 403B match, which would have cost another approximately $500,000. As you know, we offer different health insurance plans, one of which is an HSA. Our insurance experts tell us that many of our teachers and other employees, for that matter, would benefit from migrating to the HSA from the plans they currently are on. But it's tough to get people to do that. Everybody likes the insurance they have. There's some concern about making a change, and high deductible means there's a high deductible, so you have to have out-of-pocket expenses at the beginning of a year. So as to try to help people do what the experts say would be in their best interest, you authorized and we offered and we agreed in our negotiations to a contribution that would go to the HSA accounts for employees who took the high deductible plan. It would be $1,000 for someone taking a single insurance, employee-only coverage, and $2,000 for anyone taking any of the other plans that are available, either employee and spouse, employee independence, or family. Total cost of that was $925,000. That assumes that most teachers would take it. Obviously, if fewer teachers took it, it would cost less because it's dependent on how many people sign up for it. We don't have that many people signed up for it right now, but the idea was that with the incentive that many people would migrate to it. And we also had in our tentative agreement that if they went there and didn't like it, they could go back to the other plans the next year. So it was kind of a safe way to try it for a year. And the hope was we'd get a lot of people to try it, they'd like it, they'd see what the experts are saying, they'd stay there, and that would be a win-win. So under this tentative agreement, what would that have looked like? What would it have meant for a typical teacher? So we took an example of a teacher that was on the Masters in 10 slot on the salary schedule, earning $56,152. The increases under the board's best offer that resulted in the tentative agreement would have been $2,400 salary increase, $500 for the bonus, $2,000 HSA contribution, again assuming that they were taking the high deductible plan on something other than the employee only. If it was employee only, that'd be $1,000. And if they didn't take the plan at all, it wouldn't be anything there. And $585 as a 1% contribution to the 403B. That was the match. Total would be $5,485, which would be just under 10% of the person's current salary. So just under 10%, these enhancements or additions to salary and benefits under the tentative agreement that was the board's best offer would have been almost 10% of this teacher's salary. How would the district have paid for this? Well, some would come from our current operating funds, but approximately $1.7 million would come from the cash balance. In other words, that's the money you would take out of your savings account, the cash balance, to use to fund this offer. the $1.7 million represents about 15% of your total cash balance, your total savings account. So we were proposing to spend about 15% of it in this one-year contract. Unfortunately, as he said, the CCA bargaining team agreed to the tentative agreement. That was on November 25th, so we reached that tentative agreement. The CCA was unable to get the tentative agreement ratified. Even though, as you know, the contract applies to all teachers here in the district, the only people who are eligible to vote on it are the CCA members. So that means that literally hundreds of teachers who would have been affected by the vote were not allowed to vote under the rules that applied. We heard we're not part of that vote. That's a CCA activity, so we're not part of that, but we've heard that only about 85 teachers voted against the tentative agreement, and as you know, the district has about 950 teachers. So about 85 voted against it, but apparently that was a majority, so that meant that it wasn't ratified. As a result, fact-finding was mandated under the law. That wasn't something we wanted. It wasn't something we chose. It was something that the law imposes on us when the contract wasn't ratified. And as part of that process, each party must submit an LBO, also known as a last best offer. As we've talked before, the offer in the LBO by law cannot result in deficit financing. Well, that's a nice lawyer term, but what does it mean? It means we're prohibited from spending any of that cash balance. You can only fund the agreement from your current operating revenue. You can't spend any of your cash balance. And as I said before, we were planning on spending about $1.7 million from the cash balance to fund the tentative agreement, our best offer, so that meant we had to take $1.7 million out of the offer in order for it to be lawful. That means that LBO, last best offer, is really a misnomer. It may be the last offer because that's part of the state process, but it sure isn't the best. The best offer was the one that we made and we agreed to with the CCA as a tentative agreement. The LBO, by law, again, that wasn't our choice. It's by law. We had to take away, we had to reduce it by the amount of the cash balance we were spending, the $1.7 million. So as you know, we're all very disappointed that in fact-finding we were prohibited from giving the same salary and benefit increases that we wanted to do and that we offered during bargaining. So how did the tentative agreement and the LBO match up? The 1% salary schedule remained the same. The step increase remained the same. The bonus pool was reduced from $500,000 to $200,000. The 1% 403B match had to be eliminated. The high deductible incentive, that $1,000, $2,000 contribution to the HSA account, had to be eliminated. And so that means under our tentative agreement, we costed it out at the $3,725,000, and that the LBO in round numbers is about $2 million. So that meant under our state-mandated LBO, we had to reduce the offer that was on the table, the tentative agreement, by about 46%. Now, we were able to do some things both in the tentative agreement and in the LBO that were enhancements. I talked to you about the financial enhancements on the last slide that we had. They weren't as great as those that we offered in the tentative agreement. They couldn't be, but they were still financial enhancements. And here are some other things that we were able to do to enhance the contract. We increased the number of personal days from 2 to 4. We did that again in the tentative agreement and in our LBO. We stated that determining the hourly rate for a teacher for hourly rate work would be done on the basis of a 6-hour day rather than 8-hour day. That means that teachers' pay goes up. And again, that was both in the tentative agreement and in our LBO. We maintained the short-term disability plan that we introduced through last year's LBO, again in the tentative agreement and in this. And we had just recently implemented, as you know, because we had just been able to implement last year's contract a few months ago. The district pays the cost of the short-term disability plan. We think, and the fact finder last year and this year held, it was better for teachers. The short-term disability plan was better for teachers than the old catastrophic leave bank. One of the reasons being that it covers maternity leave, which is not covered by the catastrophic leave bank. And by way of example, in 2012-2013 school year, 2 teachers got benefits from the catastrophic leave bank. 2 teachers used that, and we had 60 teachers take maternity leave. So going forward, all those 60 teachers would get short-term disability benefits. It permits teachers to use half days to make up the difference between full pay and the short-term disability pay. And like I said, last year, the fact finder, the neutral third-party fact finder, determined that the short-term disability plan was better for teachers than the catastrophic leave bank, and so that was another reason to continue to include it in our last best offer this year. We enhanced it this year. There had been an issue last year about, well, if I'm a teacher and I donated a sick day to join the sick leave bank, what happened to that day? Where did it go? And so both in the tentative agreement and in the LBO that we submitted, we said if you donated a day, or some teachers may have even donated 2 days or 3, but if you donated a day, you would get that back. You would get that back. So as we put together your last best offer, there are IRB requires that there are 8 categories of information and documents, and recommends that the parties also submit an additional 13 items as part of this LBO submission. It's pretty substantial. And we submitted our LBO with all the required and recommended information as required. The CCA submitted its LBO on time as well, but the CCA's LBO included only one of the required documents and none of the recommended documents. In response to that, IRB, the state agency that is empowered to deal with all these bargaining and fact-finding and mediation and all those things, that agency where we had to submit our LBOs on its own issued a notice of substantial non-compliance of LBO. In other words, they issued a notice that said, we received the CCA LBO, but we are informing you that it is substantially non-compliant with the legal requirements for an LBO. CCA filed a motion to amend its LBO to try and put in that other information that originally had been left out, and the fact finder denied the motion, and in denying it, she held that, quote, in its motion to amend, the CCA acknowledges awareness of the deadline for submitting its LBO. The CCA acknowledges its conscious decision to delay the scheduling of the meeting at which a ratification vote would be taken with respect to the mediated agreement. The CCA further accepts that in anticipation that the mediated agreement would be ratified, it failed to put forth the effort required to complete the timely preparation of its LBO. Under these circumstances, the CCA alone is responsible for its inability to submit a complete LBO. So that meant we proceeded to the hearing based on the LBO we submitted and the one portion of an LBO that the CCA submitted. That hearing was on December 12th, 2013. The fact finder issued her decision on December 19th, 2013, and the neutral third-party fact finder ruled in favor of the district and selected the district's LBO as the contract between the parties, and she did that really for several reasons. The first is she said that the CCA's LBO was substantially non-compliant. That's the point I just addressed. So it was non-compliant with the legal requirements of an LBO because it was missing 7 out of 8 of the required items. And I have cited there the FF stands for fact finder, so that's the fact finder's decision in the numbered paragraphs where she held these things that I'm putting up on the screen right now. The second thing she said was that the CCA's proposed contract contained provisions that are unlawful, things like pay by the minute and other items. And I know that those types of items have really had a lot of discussion among teachers, among the public, among you, among us at the bargaining table, and particularly things like 6th period pay. And those are things that the fact finder found last year to be unlawful. The state agency, IRB, to which that decision was appealed, said those things were unlawful, and the fact finder again this year said those things were unlawful. So those types of some of those, not all, but some of those kind of extra pay things, again, not all, because our LBO has some provisions for extra pay in it, but the fact finder and IRB, the state agency, have said many of those types of extra pay things are unlawful. And basically they've said extra pay for doing things that you're assigned to do within the school day are unlawful. And this fact finder even indicates that some things outside of the school day, many things outside of the school day also can't result in additional pay. So again, those are things, those are constraints that are imposed on us by the law, not bargaining positions we're taking at the bargaining table, but rather bargaining restrictions that we must comply with because we're all required to comply with the law. The fact finder also found that the CCEA's proposed contract contained provisions that are contrary to the public interest. She specifically said that the provision in the CCEA last best offer that would call for full-time paid leave for the CCEA president, she found that not to be in the public interest. She found that last year as well. It was in their LBO last year and again this year, and both times found that was not in the public interest. And she said that the CCEA's proposed contract likely would result in deficit financing, which is unlawful. She said she really didn't have to make that decision in the end because she was choosing ours based on all those other factors, so it wasn't necessary to really run that to ground. So what happens next? Well, the CCEA has until January 21 to appeal to IRB. Again, that's the state agency. And if the CCEA appeals, then IRB has 30 days to decide the appeal. If there is an appeal to IRB, the district cannot implement the LBO. We can't implement the pay raises and so forth. We can't do that while the appeal is pending. So this means we wouldn't be able to give the teachers the pay raises or other enhancements in our LBO during that appeal process while it's in front of IRB. Any questions on this current year's contract before I move to last year's, an update on last year's? Okay. Let's talk for a minute about last year, the 2012-13 contract. As you might recall, there was a delay in fact-finding of almost a year. The law is set up to try and get you a contract by the end of the year, by the end of the calendar year, for your current school year. That did not happen last year because the CCEA filed an unfair labor practice and got a stay. In other words, it got sort of a timeout in the fact-finding proceeding, that you can't go further until the unfair labor practice is looked into. The hearing officer, again, third-party neutral hearing officer that heard the evidence on the alleged unfair labor practice charge, determined that the district had not committed an unfair labor practice. The CCEA appealed that to IRB. IRB ruled in favor of the district and, like the neutral third-party hearing officer, concluded that the district had not committed an unfair labor practice. As a result, the stay was lifted and fact-finding was held. It was almost a year later. It was this fall rather than the fall before, but fact-finding was held. And the fact-finder ruled in favor of the district and chose the district's LBO as a contract between the parties. CCA appealed that to IRB. After briefing and oral argument, IRB ruled in favor of the district and affirmed that the district's LBO is a contract between the parties. CCA has now appealed IRB's ruling to Marion Superior Court. This appeal to the court, Marion Superior Court, will take many months and maybe as long as a year to year and a half to work its way through the court system. I hope it's less than that, but it likely will take that long and may take longer. So you might ask, well, what happens in the meantime while this thing's being appealed? And as you know, the district implemented the LBO after IERB's ruling and before the CCA appealed to the court. So teachers are receiving the benefits and the enhancements and salary increases that we had in our LBO for last year. They are currently receiving that, and it was retroactive. So they're receiving that from the beginning of the prior school year and continuing to receive it today. And barring any action by CCA or the court, teachers will continue to receive these enhancements during the pendency of the appeal. Questions?
I just have one question. Knowing that the 2013-14 contract is based on the 2012-13 contract, and that is being appealed, what happens to the contract that we're currently getting ready to put into place?
Well, I think that we continue to move forward with that everyone who has looked at it, the fact finder, IERB, everyone who's looked at it has said it's a lawful contract and it's the right contract and it's the one that they chose. So far, all indications are that our 12-13 contract is lawful and is the contract that we ultimately will have. There's still an appeal pending. Granted, there's still an appeal pending and something could happen. But in the meantime, we've implemented it and nothing has stopped us from doing that. So we'll continue, and with the 13-14, my anticipation is that if there is an appeal to IERB, once the IERB proceedings are completed, if we prevail and our LBO is still chosen by IERB, then it would be my thought that we would do the same thing we did last year. We would go ahead and implement it like we did last year. There may continue to be a further appeal. Of course, if IERB does something different for some reason, then we'll have to revisit that.
In the 12-13 LBO, the teachers' personal days were reduced from 4 to 2. And it is our intention to increase that back to 4. But meanwhile, since we can't implement the 13-14, are they still at 2?
They are still at 2 in the contract. But we are trying, as you know, every one of you as board members and the superintendent and everybody else in administration does not want to be in a position where teachers have to give back anything. And so we are trying hard to work through that and doing everything we can to try and achieve that result so that teachers won't have to give back anything.
I just had a general comment. If you go to the Carmel School website homepage, there's a link to negotiation update. Is this presentation going to be there? Because I know that there's the fact finder reports there. I mean, if someone's really interested, who's listening or who sees this later on, they can go there and check all these things out. So is this report going to be there too?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Spanenberg. Mr. Pfeiffer, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. I wonder if you could just remind us, I'm thinking there's been considerable effort devoted over quite a lot of time to try to reach agreement on both of these contracts. Can you give us a sense of how many sessions we've had to wade through to try to get to an agreement?
I know that last year I believe we had 10 bargaining sessions plus 2 or 3 mediation sessions prior to fact-finding. I have to check my notes, so don't hold me to those numbers, but that's close. This year I think we had a similar number. I don't have my notebook with me. Do you know, Ryan, exactly how many we had? Bargaining sessions before mediation?
Not right off the top. Excuse me, not right off the top of my head.
We had a similar numbers of bargaining sessions, and then when we came to mediation, of course, both sides were here all day on Sunday and all day Sunday night, which did result in the early morning hours of that Monday, November 25th, in a tentative agreement. So there has been a lot of time and effort put into this.
I believe we had 8 negotiation sessions and then 2 mediation
sessions.
Yeah.
Well, you and the other members of the negotiation team, Roger and Ryan certainly have our thanks for really trying hard to get us to an agreement. We really do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Pfeiffer.
Thank you.
As well as the others on our negotiating team. We really do appreciate all of your help and service in trying to get us a contract. So now we're moving on to elections of officers. That being said, we're very excited that 2014 is here, and we do reorganize, so I will ask for a nomination for a slate of officers for our school board.
Madam President, I would like to move that we approve the slate of officers that you will let us know. Oh, are you going to
Who might
announce?
they be?
Who might they be?
Yes.
Oh, do I get to say? Oh, who might they? President would be Layla Spannenberg. Vice President would be Mrs. Pam Nowes. And Secretary would be Mrs. Tricia Hackett.
We have a motion on the table. May I get a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Could you repeat the names, please?
Yes. The motion on the table that has been seconded is President Layla Spannenberg, Vice President Pamela Nowles, and Secretary Mrs. Hackett, Tricia Hackett.
Well, I have to say that I think those are three excellent choices. Of course, in a group of five that includes this quality, how can you go wrong?
Any other discussion? Okay. With that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, wonderful. And thank you for your vote of confidence. I know we all feel the same way, and we look forward to continuing our work as a team. So thank you. Next, we move into a series of appointments. The first four to be brought to us by Dr. Wall.
Thank you. These are our annual appointments that we review at the January meeting, and the first appointment recommended the board appoint treasurer and deputy treasurer and approve continuation bonds for the treasurer and deputy treasurer for the period January 2014 through December 2014. It is also recommended the board approve position schedule bond for extracurricular treasurers. And as you can see in the background information, we're recommending that the administration recommends that the board consider appointing Mr. Roger McMichael as treasurer and Mr. David Stowers as deputy treasurer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wall. May I get a motion? Mrs. Freed?
I would move that we appoint Mr. Roger McMichael as our treasurer and Mr. David Stowers as deputy treasurer, and also continue with the bonds of treasurer and deputy treasurer for the period January 2014 through December of 2014.
Second?
I'll second, but I just want to clarify that the bonds also include extracurricular treasurers, high school, middle school, and elementary educational service center activities.
Right.
Thank you. So the motion we have on the table right now that has been seconded, boy, this is difficult tonight, to have Mr. Roger McMichael as our treasurer, Mr. David Stowers as our deputy treasurer, and furthermore, the continuation of bonds for the treasurer and deputy treasurer for the amount of $100,000 each, as well as extracurricular treasurers for the amount of $50,000 for high school, $20,000 for each of the middle schools, $10,000 for each of the elementary schools, and including the Educational Service Center. Open for discussion. All in favor? Aye. Next, please.
Next, we have the annual appointment of general counsel. Administration is recommending that Mr. David Day continue as general counsel for Carmel Clay Schools.
May I get a motion? Mr. Phillips.
I would move to make Mr. Day our general counsel.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Good choice. Great discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next.
Next appointment, administration continues to recommend executive secretary to the Board of Education, Mrs. Dana Kendall.
May I get a motion? Mrs.
I will
Hackett.
definitely move for Dana Kendall to serve as our executive secretary.
I think we can all second that.
I'd love that. Yeah. Discussion. We're really happy with you.
Yes, we are.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Next.
Next appointment, recommending that Mrs. Christy Cloud continue as cable television representative for our Carmel Clay schools.
May I get a motion? Yes, Mrs. Freed.
I would like to move that Mrs. Christy Cloud continue as our cable television representative for this 2014 year.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Well, I just want to say that I really appreciate you looking further into this and letting us, making sure that we could actually use Christy, because she has really done a great job in the past, and we're excited that she can continue with that.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next, we have it's recommended annually that the board appoint a board member to serve as the Indiana School Board Association delegate.
That's it. We have a misprint.
Oh, we got a typo?
Yes. We have
I'm
the
sorry.
board has a typo, not you. The board has
Oh.
a typo.
Okay.
So we just have an association delegate.
Okay, thank you. Association delegate, thank you. And the board is interested in appointing Mrs. Pamela Niles as that continued representative.
May I get a motion?
I would move that Mrs. Niles continues as the Indiana School Board Association delegate.
Second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Excellent.
The next appointment is the board annually reviews and appoints a board member to the Carmel Clay Parks Board. And Mrs. Kathy Freed is being recommended for that appointment.
May I get a motion? Mr. Phillips?
I would like to move that Mrs. Kathy Freed be appointed to that important position.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Yes.
Yes, I would like to see that this appointment be a 2-year appointment, so that there's some continuity on the park board when we do this, and it's not redone every year.
Thank you. I think that's a great idea. Well, last year.
This is your second year, too.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent, thank you. And a related item that we have is the established salaries for school board members. And the little question up here, and it's the legislative liaison. And what I wanted to let everybody in the audience know, the legislative liaison is a position within the School Board Association. So once we have delegates, they can run for that other office, which we do not have that other office yet. So until you are a legislative delegate, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I was under the impression that there is a legislative liaison to the Indiana School Boards Association, and I was that legislative liaison. But we also have had in the past a legislative liaison to the state, so that we can, so that person, and I did that one, I think the first 2 years, and I did our legislative priorities and established those as a board, and then we worked with the State House and the different representatives concerning that. So that's what.
Well, what I would like to ask is, please refresh my memory, because I was not aware that that particular position required by statute, required a vote from the board to have somebody fulfill that position.
I remember it being appointed when I was on the board the first 2 years, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
Can I maybe add
Please.
something? There was a point where our board operated where we had some separate subcommittees and some separate liaisons or point persons for different topics. And I believe at least my understanding is how we've trained and had retreats and have organized now that the policy committees really are only subcommittee, and we no longer use liaisons. We just have the one policy subcommittee. That's how I understand it now. So as far as a community relations liaison, legislative liaison, we don't operate under those parameters currently, unless I'm misunderstanding that.
Well, give me about 30 seconds because I'm looking at our organizational meeting and what is required by state law that we reorganize and delegate. So, one moment. And you're all welcome to Google search too. Okay, we have to elect a president, a vice president, a secretary. We shall also appoint our treasurer and deputy treasurer. And by the way, this is Indiana Code 2026 4-1. Now, that being said, our bylaw 151 says that we will do the president, vice president, secretary, our time and dates of regular meetings, our legal counsel, board member representatives to various organizations, which we did our delegate and our school board, the Parks Board, treasurer, deputy treasurer, executive secretary. We did put in here a legislative liaison to the School Board Association. And we revised this on April 23rd of 2013. So that being said, we have to have another vote of an appointment to a legislative liaison. Do you? Go ahead. Tricia, you had a question?
Well,
Let's have a discussion.
I was going to go ahead and make a motion, but I can pass it off to Kathy if she likes.
I would like to move that we appoint Pam Nowles as our legislative liaison.
Second.
And I'll second that.
Discussion?
Stand correct. Oh.
Could you repeat the motion?
Yes, the motion is to have Pam Nowles serve as the legislative liaison to the Indiana School Boards Association. Although that could be a separate, yes, okay.
Could be. It could be a separate.
Although we had it stated on our agenda. Well, let's have a discussion.
Well,
Is there anybody else who's interested? Because this was a surprise.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
I don't think that this necessarily means that you're serving on their legislative committee, but you are a liaison to understand what their legislative committee has put forth for their legislative priorities for this current session, and maybe to work with ISBA going to current sessions or understanding our position and bringing that back to the school board so that we're aware of what ISBA is doing.
And is that what the position has, is that what the representative for that position has done in the past?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Any other discussion?
yes. And I guess I would suggest that maybe the policy committee looks into that, because my understanding, like I said earlier, is that we as a board have moved away from that. So if there's a specific appointment we need to make, I mean, I realize it's in our bylaw, so I think Pam would be the perfect person. But from what I understand is how we've organized ourselves now is is to not have liaisons from the board in different things, that we delegate those responsibilities to our superintendent and hold our superintendent responsible for those things. And as a board, we don't have those different things. So I'm, if there's a legal, since it's in our bylaws, I think we need to do it.
Right.
If there's a legal reason to do it, we need to continue it and keep it in our bylaw. But if it's really a remnant of a past way of organizing, I think we need to.
I'm going to quickly chime in because I do know when we revisited this particular bylaw, because we've been going through each and every bylaw, I do know what we did is pulled up every position that we currently have. And that's where this got added, because this was an addition to the bylaw. Please go ahead.
Well, I am still pretty new to this,
Yes.
even though I've had my anniversary. But it seems to me that an important function of working with ISBA as NSBA is to keep the board current on legislative happenings and activities and initiatives that involve that would better our school district. So I thought in the past, not only did they work with ISBA, but they also were active working with the state legislature to keep up to breast with what's going on in Indiana. Now, I know ISBA helps with that.
Right.
So I don't know whether this is part of the job that she
Of the
would
delegate, well,
of the delegate for ISBA anyway, or whether it is a separate situation, but I would hope that the person working with ISBA that closely would keep us abreast of anything we need to know.
agreed. Any other discussion on this one? Okay, so the motion on the table is to appoint Mrs. Niles, Pam Niles, as a legislative liaison to the Indiana School Board Association. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Related items, moving on to establish salaries of board members. And it is recommended that school board salaries remain at $2,000 per year as permissible by law. May I get a motion? Anyone? Mrs. Freed?
I move that the salary for the school board be kept at $2,000 per year.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Discussion. All in,
Should I keep my day job?
I think it would be advisable, should you want to pay more than your Starbucks bill. All in favor? Aye. Moving on to consent. May I get a motion to approve consent?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then at this time, we do need to perform the Board of Finance organizational meeting. So at this time, I will request a motion to suspend the School Board of Trustees workshop for the purpose of convening the Carmel Clay School Board of Finance meeting. May I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you very much. Mr. McMichael, would you provide the board with some background information regarding the Board of Finance?
Yes, each year at this time, it's required under statute that the board organizes a Board of Finance, electing a president and a secretary. Typically, the Carmel Board has chosen to elect the same president and secretary that serves on the school board. That's not required. That has been the past practice of the board. Having done that, then you have, as a Board of Finance, you be involved in two different actions. The first being to receive the report of investments, which is included in this report. And the second item is to approve the public depositories, which are also listed in this report. And that's likely to be your only action as a Board of Finance until this time next year.
Well, thank you very much. So the first action of the Board of Finance is to appoint a president and a secretary. And the administration is recommending that the president and secretary of the school board also serve as a president and secretary of the Board of Finance. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye. So now that we have officers, next I'll ask Mr. McMichael to present specifics to the report.
Yes, included in the report is a report of investments for 2013. You'll see that our total investment earnings was $72,888.78. Had an average return of 0.25%. I was saying earlier that I remember when our investment earnings on
1.4
probably
million.
two-thirds of the amount of money that we have now, a number of years ago, was $1.5 million. So you can see this is an area where, over the years, we've lost considerable revenue, because this revenue goes to our general operating fund by design. I mean, that's our intent. That is where it goes. So not much interest earnings these days.
Thank you. So then the final action of the Board of Finance is to approve the public depositories. Mr. McMichael, I know we have a list here, but will you go ahead and share this with us?
Yes, the list of institutions qualify to be named public depositories, and among other things, they must reside in the school district. Because we use we have a cash management program that we put out. We are not required, and therefore we follow that process and invest our money with. We designated one of these depositories, and we're permitted to do that because we have a cash management system. If we did not have, then we would be required to deposit our public funds proportionally in these various public depositories based on their size. But we've, since I've been here, we have not taken that approach because we try to maximize our investment earnings.
Okay. And I want to make sure that I fully understand what we are going to be voting upon. Are we voting on, or what you're recommending that we accept this list of financial institutions?
Yes, that then would permit us to place public funds,
Okay.
our public funds, in any of these
Okay.
named depositories.
Okay. So Mr. McMichael has provided us with a list of all qualified public depositories. May I have a motion to accept the list that was provided to us?
So moved.
Second? Thank you very much, Mr. Phillips. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, seeing that there's no other business for the Board of Finance, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Wonderful. Meeting is adjourned, and at this time, we'll reconvene the Carmel Clay School Board of Trustees workshop. And our big workshop topic is brought to us by Dr. Wall and Mr. McMichael. So please.
Thank you, Leila. Tonight, we'd like to present the board with a legislative update. The General Assembly kicked off its 2014 session on Monday, January 6th. And as we know, the lawmakers passed biennial budgets only in odd numbers years. This session appears to be an abbreviated one. We still are hearing, though, that lawmakers are expected to debate some significant pieces of legislation this session. And this evening, we'd like to give the board an update on circuit breaker legislation and the elimination of the personal property tax legislation. In addition, we'd like to highlight what those two pieces of legislation would do and their impact on Carmel Clay schools. We'll also look at that as an impact on a more global basis for Hamilton County schools, as well as regarding the circuit breaker, its potential impact, and the common interest we have in the circuit breaker with our municipalities, with the city of Carmel as well. And Roger's going to go through some slides to talk about the financial impact. And at the end, I'm going to share with you a resolution that we've worked on, we being the school superintendents of Hamilton County, the business managers of Hamilton County, as well as the mayors of the cities within Hamilton County, as it relates to Senate Bill 517 and the common interest that we all have regarding that impact on schools and municipalities. So I'm going to let Roger go through some slides on our legislative update.
Thank you. I'll begin with just a brief review of the circuit breaker. The board's heard about the circuit breaker for 2 or 3 years now. But the circuit breaker statute, the intent of that statute was to put a cap on property taxes, which we know that was accomplished. And the circuit breaker, from the state's perspective, is presented as taxpayer relief. From our perspective, we see it as a loss, because that is what it is. As a public entity, we are receiving less money than we did before. You can see here then that on a statewide level, the circuit breaker has resulted in $766.5 million less revenue going to governmental units. Again, from the state's perspective, they're seeing that as taxpayer relief. If you're a governmental unit, you're seeing it as a total of $766 million of revenue loss. Of that amount, $245 million is the amount for all schools across the state. You'll see in a minute here, however, that there's a wide variation amongst schools as to the negative impact that this has had in terms of funding for schools. In Hamilton County, this county's portion of that loss was $32.7 million. It's worth noting that when this kind of reduced revenue occurs, in my view, public entities are simply unable to continue to deliver the same services with this much reduced funding. While I'm optimistic that we will continue to work to get better and become more efficient, as well other governmental entities, if we knew how to spend less money, we would have been doing that before now, but we will continue to try to become more efficient. But just as a practical matter, the general public and the taxpayers will see eventually, they'll begin to see the impact of the savings or the property tax relief that they're gaining. So here is the loss for the schools from the circuit breaker in Hamilton County, and you can see that while Carmel is this is for 2013, you'll see a projected number for 2015 in a minute. So this year our loss was just over $1 million, but you can see Westfield, a district about a third of our size, almost $7 million. So you can imagine, if you take that number times 3, how devastating that would be for us, and certainly is for Westfield. Now, the first new legislation is Senate Enrolled Act 517. This really followed a previous legislation, a House Enrolled Act 1072, which was passed in 2012. This language, or this statute, is referred to as it provides for so-called protected funds, and the protected fund is a debt service, and what that fund is being protected from is any loss as a result of the debt, as a result of the circuit breaker. So essentially, what has happened up until this legislation is when there was a loss as a result of the circuit breaker, each fund suffered its loss in proportion to its size. So if your debt service was 30% of your tax rate, then it would incur 30% of the loss or the cut as a result of the circuit breaker. This new legislation, Senate Enrolled Act 517, postponed earlier legislation which said that going forward the circuit breaker loss will, the statute will protect the debt service fund, and that loss will all be pushed essentially to the capital projects fund for schools and the transportation fund. And so you can see in the highlighted, yellow highlighted areas, for Carmel, for example, this past year, 2013, our reduction in our capital projects fund revenue was just over $332,000. You can see under this legislation, and this will take effect. This is already law, so this is poised to take effect in 2015. And so unless there's a change takes place based on this year, if it had been in effect, the 332,000 reduction in our capital projects would be 674,000. You can see as a percentage, it just about doubles. We're 2.4% going to 5%. So, and likewise in our transportation fund, 349,000. The 349,000 is more than what we receive, from one year to the next, and realizing that we're continuing to be somewhat of still a growing school district. And so the transportation fund does go up as the assessed value goes up, and as the community grows, that formula does take into account that if you're growing, you're likely to need more buses and so forth. And so it has a mechanism built in to account for growth. This amount of loss would more than offset any growth. So, and understanding how transportation works, there's only so many seats on the bus, and so and there's only a certain amount of time to get children to school on time. And so in transportation, it's a matter of how many buses, how many kids, thus how many buses, and how much time it takes to run the routes. And so when you start losing revenue, it's not as simple as just reduce the number of bus drivers. You can, but at some point you're going to not have enough buses to take, capacity to take all the kids. The other choice is to reduce the salaries of the employees. As most of us know, we have difficulty filling bus driver jobs, as does every other school district that I'm aware of, with what we pay now. So the choice of proposing to reduce salaries would, in my view, not be a very good choice, because we first have to have people willing to do the job. Yes.
Pardon the interruption, Roger.
Right.
But, I can't help but thinking this might be a safety issue at some point. If we can't replace aging buses, at some point our kids are going to be at some kind of jeopardy.
Well,
don't you think?
I certainly think it's just a dilemma, and I'm going to show you. I've given you this information here for every school district, and starting with ours. But if I want to go to the last school district, actually, which is Westfield. And again, if you see the loss in Westfield's poised to lose 91.3% of their transportation fund and their capital projects fund. Clearly, you cannot operate a transportation system with 9%, less than 9% of your current budget. As a result of that, they either have or are considering have their board adopt a resolution to eliminate transportation. They can, but they have to give a 3-year notice. Now, they still have to provide what's legally required. You have to provide transportation under the law for special needs students. You do not have to provide transportation for all other students. But if you're not going to, there is a notice period. It's a 3-year notice. So they either have adopted that resolution in the event that something doesn't happen here, because clearly they can't run a transportation system with 9% of their budget. Their other alternative, of course, is to use their general operating funds. They can do that. To put that in perspective, if that were Carmel, that's about $9 million. So the thought of us, or in our case, if we were to consider using $9 million of our operating funds for transportation, you can see what that would do to our educational program. Those are the kind of difficult decisions that school districts all across the state are going to be facing. We are in much better shape than most, fortunate for us, but our neighbors and many others throughout the state are not as fortunate, and Westfield's a good example of that. This starts based on the tax rate. So as you've heard me say many times, we have a very enviable low tax rate, which is why we're not impacted as much as some other districts. Westfield has a higher tax rate because they simply don't have the tax base that Carmel does. That coupled with growing, and and with several of us in Hamilton County, because we have been growing school districts, there's some clear tendency that if you're a growing school district, you may have higher debt because you've found it necessary to add schools and build schools and so forth. And so thus, when you're quote, protecting the debt service fund, that's having a greater impact as compared to, if a district didn't have debt, this wouldn't be an issue. But you know, a good number of the districts have debt and varying amounts. And so that between the amount of debt and the level of their tax rate, you can see the, you know, the result and the variation. And so what we want to do is emphasize, certainly share what the negative impact is to Carmel, but we feel it's appropriate that we have also a professional responsibility to share what's happening to everybody else, and not just us, because this will affect children all over the state. Now, the next item, then, the second item, has to do with the proposal to eliminate tax on personal property. Now, personal property, the majority of that, we're talking about equipment and machinery in business. So if you're the Toyota plant and have, you know, major equipment as a part of that plant, in Indiana, the businesses pay taxes on that. We're not necessarily opposed to the elimination of this tax. What we're opposed to is if it's not replaced. And so if this tax were to be eliminated, you can see again that the loss to the state would be $963 million. $453 million of that's been projected would be shifted to other taxes. That's just a polite way of saying that other taxpayers, principally property tax, would go up. And so, and not only to individuals in terms of your personal individual property tax, but also businesses as well. Their taxes on their property would go up if the personal property was eliminated. But you can see a little less than half of the loss, which leaves another $510,000, which would be a net loss. And again, for Hamilton County, that would be another $13 million on top of the $33 million that Hamilton County is already losing. And so you can see where this is headed. And so for schools, again, I've highlighted the impact to schools. I'll speak to a minute in terms of this in a minute about the 30% floor. But if this were to be eliminated and not made up someplace else in some other tax, then you can see the impact that would have on schools. Again, for Carmel, this is projected for 2015, so you'll see the projection is that our circuit breaker loss as it is will be about $1.5 million. I don't think ours will be that high, by the way. But the state has taken current numbers and assumed that if it grew from 2012 to 2013, they're just doing a mathematical computation. But nevertheless, you can see based on these assumptions that ours would almost double. It would go from $1,559,000 to $2.8 million, or another $1,300,000, in addition to what the loss we're already suffering. And likewise, you see the other districts. So now we've got Westfield up to $8 million a year. Just devastating if this continues. The 30% floor has to do, the way it works now is you have tax, there's the tax on personal property, but that property depreciates, but it doesn't depreciate to zero. It goes down to, it doesn't go below like 30%. So if the entire tax wasn't eliminated, but the floor was eliminated, so which would allow it to eventually go to depreciate to zero, then the loss would be less significant. But nevertheless, you can see the impact that it would have. So now, this is proposed legislation. The 517 is already in place. And as I said, the 517 language, if there's not new legislation to either to reconsider it or eliminate it or push it out or something, it will just happen in 2015. So it's already in place. This is upcoming legislation that's being proposed.
That 30% floor, help me out with this. Is this currently law, the 30% floor? Or what
yes.
is- Okay, that
Yeah.
is law.
Yes, currently there is, in other words, the property depreciates, but it doesn't depreciate to zero.
Okay.
Okay, so kind of a middle ground would be is you'd still have personal property taxes, but from the business perspective, those taxes would depreciate over time, and they would be allowed to depreciate below the 30% level. So thus, you would end up with less total personal property tax, thus less revenue. And so that would benefit the business in terms of paying less tax, not as much as if you eliminated it altogether.
This is under 517 currently,
Yes.
so this has nothing to do with the new law that's being projected for this year.
I'm sorry. No, this is not this has nothing to do with 517. This is the second subject. 517 has to do with protecting the debt service fund and pushing the circuit breaker to the transportation and the CPF. This is a total separate legislation
It's being proposed this year.
that's being proposed this year.
But the 30% floor, that is part of the circuit breaker law?
No,
That's
no.
something
This has nothing to do with the circuit breaker,
Okay,
other than we end up losing more money, but
Okay.
doesn't have anything to do with the circuit breaker.
okay, thank you.
Okay. So those are the two items that we wanted to bring to your attention, and I think Dr. Wall has a proposed resolution to share with you.
Are these slides available?
Yes, I'm sorry. In fact, I have copies. I've got them down on my desk. I'll go down and get them before
Well,
the meeting.
what we'll do, we'll post all this too,
Okay,
so that it's
Okay.
forgotten everybody.
okay.
As well as this resolution. The resolution that I'm handing to you, and we'll post this too, so everyone will have access to it. I hand this to you as an information item this evening, and contingent on our review, would like to propose it for the action meeting in January for us. Tricia, if you want to shoot those down here, I'll send them Roger's way. Sorry about that. This is historic in many ways, and David Day, being a Hamilton County historian, said he does not know when all these entities came together to champion a resolution. And those entities would be Fisher Town Council, Westfield City Council, Carmel City Council, Noblesville City Council, Hamilton County Commissioners, Hamilton County Council Concerning, and Hamilton County Schools. All those entities are united on this resolution, and the meat of this would be, starting at the bottom of the resolution, items 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the first item is about Senate Bill 517, and as Roger depicted, the circuit breaker losses and debt service to allow school corporations to continue to offer bus transportation. Number 2, to permit continuation of high-quality education. Hamilton County requests an amendment to the school funding formula that increases base foundation funding to amount equal to the federal cost of living adjustment. 3, promote sustainable schools. Hamilton County requests that the state allocate future increases in state education funding to base funding. And then 4 would be just the resolution in full force. The purpose, having all these entities represented, is there's a common interest. And that common interest is to continue to preserve the quality education, not only in the county of Hamilton, but the state of Indiana. And as we've had these discussions, we believe this would be a model for any and all counties or school corporations throughout the state of Indiana, as it depicts the challenges that we all face as a result of some of this legislation. And as Roger said very eloquently, Senate Bill 517, that is set to go into place. This legislative session, we'd like there to be attention to Senate Bill 517 so that that can be stopped. So please take a chance to peruse this. We feel it's important that as a county, we're united on this. It has an impact on all the services provided to our, not only our community, but our students in the classroom. So,
Okay.
yes.
Yes. First of all, who will be receiving this resolution?
We would like to, obviously contingent on everyone passing it, send it to all of our elected officials, showing that we're united.
This all across the state or just Hamilton County elected?
This would be focused on our Hamilton County representatives.
Okay. And who would present it? I mean, are you going to send it to them by mail, or are you going to actually hand it to them?
We've all met with our representatives, physically, but person to person, and I would suggest, we haven't discussed that detail, but I would suggest it be hand-delivered, much like all of our meetings have been, because we've met with all of them.
Okay. And have you considered sending this to ISBA so that they know what your resolution is and may suggest it to other people across the state?
It's a good suggestion. That's not been part of the discussion, but I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Okay. As new legislative liaison, I thought I'd throw that
Very
out.
good. That's very good.
At the legislative breakfast on Friday, the Chamber's legislative breakfast, the president of the Indiana Chamber was unaware that this was impacting all the school systems in Hamilton County. Has anybody reached out to further inform him
Well, that
of
was
what's going on?
part of the post-discussion as we all met to look at this resolution. We all kind of pondered that, and indicated that there would be follow-up with that individual to talk with them about this. But this impacts everyone in the state.
Right.
And we're not just trying to draw attention to our county, which we have a vested interest in our county, and then obviously Carmel Clay Schools. But, so yes, there was follow-up with that individual from one of our members, as well as, I think your school board association recommendation is a good one, because this could be replicated throughout.
Yes. Right.
This
And they
hits
have-
everyone.
And the association has, in the past, sent us resolutions from Fort Wayne and other school districts.
And in our meetings, we have met with school corporations throughout the state about this topic, all very interested, same interest.
Yeah, because even on the news lately, there are school districts that are asking to suspend their transportation systems because they can't afford them, and the state has denied them. So,
Muncie is the most recent
Yes.
glaring example.
So then, I guess I won't make any assumptions that the board is going to support this, but it seems highly likely. Are you looking for us to vote on this at the next meeting?
Yeah,
Is that what you'd like to see?
the suggestion
Okay.
would be contingent on this review, bring it forth at our January regular meeting for action.
Okay. Other discussion items with regard to legislative updates, questions, finances? Pam?
Yes, I also got a survey from one of our legislators who talked about the state surplus from last year being over $400 million and wanted to know what they should do with it. And I thought that was a rather silly question, being in the fact that a couple of years ago they took money away from the school systems and Carmel lost $3.8 million at that time. I think if the state is facing more surpluses, and they're also talking about voucher systems, especially for preschool children. And I'm not against the preschool initiative, but and also they're still on the tax cut thing. They're still talking about that. So I think there are some things that, as a group, we all need to talk to our legislators about and let them know what this is all, how this is impacting us.
Yeah. And I think this resolution touches on that. Regarding the preschool, part of the discussion at the legislative breakfast was, is that going to be funded out of the base funding formula? And obviously, this resolution indicates that that should grow with the federal cost of living. So they don't have the answer on where that's going to come from, the funding.
Right.
And our concern that was expressed by one of my colleagues is, let's make sure that doesn't come out of the base foundation for all schools.
Okay.
So this is definitely time to continue to pay attention and send informed messages. This is not about anything but, just the facts, so to speak.
And just an FYI for most of us, you can get on the indiana.gov and respond to Senator Delph and Jerry Torr's surveys.
And Scott Schneider's.
And I'm not a Scott Schneider person.
That's
And Scott Schneider for different areas of Carmel.
Yeah.
Any other questions or discussion? Mr. Phillips.
I just wanted to make note of something that I saw in an excellent article by Mr. Smith, Pete Smith, the editor of the Trenton Carmel. He had quite an extensive article on the subject where one of the other things he quoted our mayor, Jim Brainerd, as saying that the amount that the city would lose. Beg your pardon. That was a compliment for you, Pete. Did you hear it? Okay, good. So I was just going to quote the mayor in Mr. Smith's article, saying that the mayor questions a policy of giving a tax or a break on chattel property, much of which is owned by out-of-state companies, and putting it on the backs of residential taxpayers. Indiana has a very low competitive tax environment. We need to focus the resources we have on education and good jobs, not minimum wage jobs. So I really appreciate the article. I appreciate Mr. Brainerd, and I appreciate what you two gentlemen are doing in meeting with your counterparts in our neighboring districts. I think is very important what you're doing.
I think the entire board echoes that, so thank you, and thank you. Other discussion items, questions? Okay, with that, meeting is adjourned.